The huge arena was filled with noise and excitement as thousands of strange alien creatures watched from their seats, high above the sandy fighting ground. Below them, a small human woman named Hana lay very still on the hot sand. Her long black hair was stuck to her face with dried blood, and her simple earth clothes were torn and dirty. The crowd of aliens made loud cheering sounds, thinking the fun was finally over. Hana had been taken from her home 3 months ago when her spaceship was attacked near a place where few ships ever went. The aliens who caught her were called the Vex, and they were a race of fighters who loved watching others fight and die. They collected the strongest warriors from many different worlds and made them battle each other in their great arena just for fun. Most prisoners died within a few days, but humans were new to the Vex, and they wanted to see what these small, weak-looking creatures could do in a fight. The Vex leader was a massive beast, with 4 strong arms and bright red eyes that glowed in the arena lights. He sat on a golden throne high above the fighting ground, watching everything that happened below him. And the other important Vex had heard stories about humans from space, traitors, but they seemed so tiny and soft compared to other fighting species. No sharp claws, no thick protective skin, no natural weapons of any kind. How could such weak beings have built ships that could travel between the stars? The Vex leader was curious about this, but he was not impressed by what he saw. Down in the arena, Hana was breathing so slowly and quietly that most of the watching aliens thought she was already dead. The Vex guards began walking across the sand toward her body to drag it away so the next fight could begin. The crowd was already getting bored and looking around for something more exciting to watch. Some aliens were making bets about which prisoner would be the next to die in the arena. They had no idea that human bodies worked very differently from what they knew about other species. What none of the aliens in the arena understood was that Hana was not lying still because she was weak or dying. Her body had gone into a special state that humans called survival mode. Her heart was beating. Very slowly, her breathing had become shallow and quiet, and her body was saving every bit of energy it could while her mind stayed completely awake and alert. She could hear everything that was happening. Around her, she was counting the footsteps of the guards walking toward her, measuring how far away the arena walls were, and making plans for what she would do next. Humans had evolved on a world where many things tried to kill them every day. They had learned to survive ice ages, diseases, natural disasters, and wars that should have destroyed them completely. But they were still alive, and they had spread across their planet by learning to adapt to any situation. They could push their bodies beyond what seemed possible when they faced death. They could ignore terrible pain, think clearly when everything was going wrong, and most important of all, they never gave up, even when everything seemed hopeless. The first guard reached Hana and bent down to check if she was really dead. He moved slowly because he thought there was no danger from a small human female who had been beaten unconscious. That was the biggest mistake he would ever make. Humans might look weak compared to other species, but they had something that made them more dangerous than anyone in the galaxy had ever imagined. They had the ability to fight back even when everyone thought they were finished. Hana's eyes opened suddenly and her hand moved faster than the guard could see. She grabbed his weapon from his belt and in one smooth movement rolled to her feet and hit him hard in the throat. The alien made a choking noise and fell backward onto the sand. The second guard tried to raise his weapon, but Hana was already moving toward him. She had spent years learning how to fight not just with strength but with speed and smart thinking. The massive crowd suddenly became completely quiet. This was not supposed to happen. Dead prisoners did not get up and start fighting again. The Vex leader leaned forward on his golden throne, his red eyes opening very wide with surprise. He had watched thousands of fights over many years, but he had never seen any fighter move the way this human female was moving. There was something in her dark eyes that made him feel afraid for the first time in his long life. Hana stood in the center of the arena, holding the guard weapon in her hand. Her body was covered with cuts and bruises from the earlier fighting, but she was very much alive and ready to fight more. She looked up at the thousands of aliens who were staring down at her, and did something that shocked every single one of them. She smiled at them, but it was not a happy smile or a friendly smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had been pretending to be weak prey. The entire arena became so quiet that people could hear the wind blowing across the sand. Everyone realized at the same moment that they had made a terrible mistake about this. Human. They thought they had been watching the death of a weak creature from a planet far away. Instead, they were about to see something that would change how every alien in the galaxy thought about the small blue world called Earth and the strange beings who lived there. More guards were already running across the sand toward Hana, but she did not look worried or scared. She looked ready for whatever was coming next. The aliens in the crowd began to whisper to each other in their own languages, asking questions that none of them could answer. What kind of species could pretend to be dead so well? What kind of warrior could move from unconscious to fighting in just a few seconds? And most frightening of all, what else could humans do that nobody knew about yet? Hana wiped blood from her mouth with her free hand and prepared herself for the real fight that was about to begin. She had been captured and hurt, and forced to fight for the entertainment of beings who thought she was nothing, more than a toy. But now she was going to show them exactly what humans were capable of when they decided they had nothing left to lose. The arena had never seen anything like what was about to happen, and neither had the galaxy. The silence in the huge arena was broken by a low, steady sound that none of the thousands of alien watchers had ever heard before. It was Hana laughing quietly, but there was something in that laugh that made every creature in the arena feel uncomfortable and afraid. She wiped more blood from her cut lip with the back of her hand and looked around at the massive crowd of aliens staring down at her. "You want a good show?" she called out, and her voice carried across the entire arena even though she was not shouting. "Let me tell you something important about humans that you do not know yet." 12 more guards came running into the arena from different doors around the fighting area. Their weapons were ready and they looked angry about what had happened to their friends. These guards were much bigger than Hana, and they had thick armor covering their bodies. The crowd began cheering again, thinking they were finally going to see the small human torn apart by superior forces. But Hana moved like flowing water, sliding between the guards' attacks in ways that seemed impossible. She had been training to fight since she was a small child on Earth, but more than that, she understood something about combat that the aliens did not know. Humans were not built to be the strongest creatures in the universe or the fastest or the ones with the best natural weapons. They were built to survive anything that tried to kill them and to learn from every fight. The first guard swung his huge metal club at her head, planning to crush her skull in one blow. Hana ducked under the weapon and used the guard's own forward movement against him, causing him to crash into another guard who was attacking from the side. Both aliens fell to the sand in a heap of armor and confused limbs. The crowd made gasping sounds as they watched two of their strongest fighters go down because of one small human. A third guard tried to grab Hana from behind, thinking he could hold her while the others attacked, but she drove her elbow back into his stomach and spun away before his arms could close around her. The guard doubled over in pain and stumbled backward, trying to catch his breath. What amazed the watching aliens most was not how well Hana could fight, but how she seemed to think several moves ahead of everyone else. Every action she took served more than one purpose. She was not just defending herself from attacks, she was studying how each guard moved, learning their weaknesses and planning what she would do next. This was the human advantage that had allowed them to become the most successful species on their dangerous home planet. In the special viewing area, where the most important aliens sat, representatives from different worlds watched. With growing worry, they had all heard rumors about humans from space traders and explorers. But seeing one actually fight was completely different. A tall reptilian creature with green scales leaned toward his neighbor, who looked like a giant insect with many eyes. "How is she doing this?" the reptilian alien whispered. "She should have been killed 3 times already by now." The insect creature clicked its sharp mouthparts together, nervously making a sound like breaking sticks. "I have heard stories. From colonies near human space, they say humans do not fight like other species. They fight like the entire universe is trying to destroy them, and they simply refuse to die, no matter what happens." Back in the sandy arena, Hana had already defeated 8 of the 12 guards who had been sent to kill her. She was bleeding from several new cuts on her arms and face, but she moved as if the pain meant absolutely nothing to her. The 4 remaining guards hesitated, looking at each other with uncertainty. They had never faced an opponent who seemed to become more dangerous as the fight continued. The Vex leader stood up from his golden throne, all four of his powerful arms clenched into tight fists. This was not going the way he had planned at all. He had expected a quick execution that would entertain his guests and show off the power of his arena. Instead, he was watching a demonstration of human fighting ability that was making his own warriors look weak and foolish. He activated his communication device and spoke in a voice that boomed across the entire arena so everyone could hear his words. "Enough of these games," he announced. "We will stop playing with this human creature. Release the Death Stalker immediately." A sound like thunder rumbled through the crowd as thousands of aliens gasped and made frightened noises. The Death Stalker was the arena's ultimate weapon, a creature that had been specially bred and trained to kill anything that moved. It stood as tall as 3 normal beings, had claws that could cut through metal and skin so thick that most weapons could not hurt it. The Death Stalker had fought in the arena many times, and it had never lost a single battle. A massive metal gate at one end of the arena began to slide, open with a grinding sound that made the wall shake. The Death Stalker emerged from the darkness behind the gate, and the sight of it made even the bravest aliens in the crowd lean back in their seats. The creature looked like a combination of the most dangerous predators from a dozen different worlds with glowing yellow eyes and teeth as long as sword blades. When the Death Stalker roared, the sound was so loud and terrifying that it made the arena walls vibrate, and several aliens in the crowd covered their ears. The remaining guards in the arena quickly ran away, leaving Hana alone to face the ultimate killing machine. Hana looked at the enormous beast walking toward her and felt something that surprised her. She was not afraid of it at all. Instead, she felt a strange calm settling over her mind and body. This was what humans called being in the zone, a mental state where time seemed to slow down and everything became perfectly clear. It was the same state of mind that had allowed her ancient ancestors to hunt animals much larger and stronger than themselves using nothing but simple tools and clever thinking. The Death Stalker began moving faster, coming toward her with its claws extended and its mouth open, showing rows of deadly teeth. The crowd held its breath, certain they were about to watch the human finally die in the most violent way possible. But as the creature leaped through the air toward her with incredible speed, Hana did something that no one in the arena expected. She ran straight toward the Death Stalker instead of away from it. The arena had turned into a battlefield unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Hana and the Death Stalker moved together as if they had been fighting as partners for many years instead of just a few minutes. The creature's raw power combined with Hana's smart thinking created a fighting team that the guards simply could not handle no matter how many weapons they carried. When the Death Stalker would charge at a group of enemies, Hana would point it toward their weakest spots and tell it exactly where to attack. When guards tried to surround them from all sides, she would signal the creature to leap high over their heads while she slid underneath their weapons. They protected each other's blind spots and knew what the other would do next with a teamwork that left all the watching aliens completely speechless. But the most terrifying thing for the crowd was not the fighting itself. It was watching Hana continue to talk to other creatures that the Vex brought into the arena. The arena masters had released additional monsters to help their guards, thinking that overwhelming numbers would end this rebellion quickly and brutally. Instead, Hana began speaking to each new creature in the same calm, gentle voice she had used with the Death Stalker. A 6-legged beast with poisonous spines all over its back stopped trying to attack when she made specific sounds that seemed to remind it of its homeworld. A flying creature with wings like razor blades began circling above them in a protective pattern instead of diving down to tear them apart. "This is completely impossible," whispered the insect-like ambassador in the special viewing area. "How can one human control so many different species from so many different worlds?" An elderly alien with tentacles instead of arms shook his head slowly while watching the scene below. "She is not controlling them at all," he said quietly. "Look carefully at their eyes. They are not following orders like slaves. They are choosing to fight alongside her because they want to." The truth was both simpler and more amazing than any of the aliens could understand. Hana was not using any special power or advanced technology to control the creatures. She was simply recognizing that every living being in the arena, no matter how different they looked or where they came from, shared certain basic needs and feelings. Fear and pain and loneliness and the desire for freedom were languages that every species could understand. The Vex leader was now standing at the very edge of his viewing platform, all four of his powerful arms shaking with rage. His perfect entertainment system was falling apart in front of representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Even worse, they were starting to look at him with expressions he had never seen directed at him before. Not respect or fear, but something that made his blood feel cold in his veins. They were looking at him with pity, like he was something small and pathetic. Activate all the arena defense systems, he commanded his frightened technicians. Flood the entire fighting area with paralyzing gas. Kill everything down there if you have to. I do not care about the cost. But before his desperate orders could be carried out, something happened that would be talked about in alien bars and government meeting halls for many generations to come. Hana looked up at the special viewing section, and her voice carried clearly across the entire massive arena without any electronic amplification. "You're afraid," she said, and every single being in the huge structure could hear her words perfectly. "Not of me, and not of these creatures you have tortured into fighting for your entertainment. You are afraid of something much more dangerous than any weapon." She gestured toward the creatures now standing with her in the center of the arena. The Deathstalker, the six-legged beast, the flying razorwing, and several others that had joined their growing group. All of them had been weapons of the arena designed only to kill, but now they stood together as something completely different. "We represent an idea that your entire system depends on people never thinking about," she continued. "You have built everything on the belief that beings have no choice but to accept whatever you do to them. But there is always a choice. There is always another way to live. And there is always hope, even in the darkest, most terrible places." The crowd of thousands was completely silent now. Many of the aliens had come to the arena expecting to see violence and death for their entertainment. Instead, they were watching something that challenged everything. They thought they knew about power and control and the way the galaxy worked. In the special viewing area, several ambassadors were quietly activating their personal communication devices, sending urgent messages back to their home governments. They had come to this world to evaluate the Vex as potential allies or trading partners. Now they were seeing something that would change their entire approach to galactic politics and diplomacy. The reptilian ambassador leaned toward his companion. "We need to completely reconsider our intelligence reports about humans," he whispered urgently. "If one of them can do this, what might their entire species be capable of when they decide to act back in the arena?" Hana was not finished with her message. She had realized that this moment was about much more than her own survival or even the freedom of the creatures around her. This was an opportunity to send a message that would travel across the entire galaxy and change how every species thought about Earth and its people. "My name is Hana Kim," she announced clearly. "I am from a planet called Earth, and I represent a species that has spent its entire history learning how to survive situations that should have been impossible. We have faced ice ages that froze our world, diseases that killed, millions, natural disasters that destroyed our cities, and wars that should have ended our civilization completely. But we are still here, and we are still growing stronger." She paused and looked directly at the Vex leader with eyes that showed no fear at all. "And we are coming to the stars not as conquerors who want to destroy everything in our path, but as partners to any species that wants to build something better than what exists right now." The Deathstalker roared its agreement, and all the other creatures joined in with their own calls and sounds. The noise was not threatening or violent. It was a declaration of unity and hope that made the arena walls shake with something that had never been heard there before. It was the sound of freedom itself being born. What happened next would later be called the Arena Revolution, though historians would argue for many decades about whether it was planned by Hana or simply the natural result of human nature meeting a system that was built on cruelty and oppression. The creatures in the arena were not the only ones who had been listening carefully to Hana's words. Throughout the massive structure in dark cells and holding areas that the crowd never saw, hundreds of other prisoners from dozens of different worlds heard her message clearly. They had been captured, enslaved, and forced to fight for the entertainment of beings who saw them as nothing more than disposable objects to be used and thrown away. But now they heard something that changed everything, in their hearts and minds. They heard the voice of someone who completely refused to accept that this was simply the way things had to be forever. The first sign that something was going very wrong for the Vex came from the lower levels of the arena. Complex guards who had been stationed at prisoner-holding areas began reporting strange sounds over their communication devices, not screams of fear or pain, which they were completely used to hearing, but something else entirely. Singing prisoners from different worlds who could not even understand each other's languages were somehow creating music together. Then came the sounds of metal being bent and broken. Cell doors that had held strong for many years were suddenly giving way and breaking open. Not because the prisoners had somehow become physically stronger, but because they were working together in ways they never had before. They were sharing knowledge, teaching each other, and combining their different abilities in the arena itself. Hana noticed movement in the crowd above. Some of the younger aliens, particularly those from species that had their own histories of being oppressed and controlled, were standing up from their seats. A few were actually cheering for her and the creatures around her. Others were simply staring as if they were seeing the arena for the first time, and finally understanding what it really represented. The Vex leader was screaming orders now, demanding that his guards and technicians restore order immediately. But his voice was being drowned out by something he had never heard in his arena before, the sound of the crowd turning against him. Many aliens were shouting questions about why they had been watching this cruelty for entertainment. Others were demanding to know how many innocent beings had died for their amusement. "How is this even possible?" he roared at his remaining advisors. "She is just one human female. How can one small, weak creature cause all of this chaos and destruction?" Of his advisors, an older Vex who had served the arena for many decades looked at his leader with an expression that might have been respect if it had been directed at someone else entirely. "She is not causing this," the advisor said quietly while watching the revolution spread throughout the complex. "She is simply showing everyone what was already there inside them. The desire for something better than what we have built in this place." Hana heard the sounds of liberation coming from the levels below the arena and knew that her message had reached far beyond just the fighting floor. But she also knew that the real test was still coming. The Vex would not give up their power and wealth easily, and there were still thousands of beings throughout the complex who depended on the current system for their survival. She looked at the Deathstalker and all the other creatures who had joined her small army. They had become much more than allies in a fight. They had become a living symbol of what was possible when different beings chose to work together instead of against each other. "Are you ready for the hardest part of all this?" she asked them quietly. The Deathstalker made a sound that might have been laughter if it had come from a human throat. The other creatures gathered even closer, forming a protective circle around Hana. They had tasted real freedom for the first time in their lives, and they were not going to let anyone take it away from them. What happened over the next several hours would be studied by military strategists, sociologists, and philosophers for many generations. It was not a traditional battle with armies fighting against each other. It was a demonstration of how quickly an unjust system could completely fall apart when enough people decided they would no longer participate in it. Guards throughout the complex found themselves facing not just escaped prisoners, but arena workers who had decided they were tired of cleaning up blood after executions. Maintenance staff who had spent years repairing damage from fights they were never allowed to watch began opening doors and disabling security systems that kept prisoners trapped. Even some of the alien spectators joined the revolution, helping to evacuate prisoners and providing information about the arena's layout that only VIP visitors would know. They had come expecting entertainment, but instead found themselves part of something much more important. By the time the sun set on the arena everything had changed completely. The Vex leader had fled along with most of his loyal supporters. The arena itself was empty, except for those who were working to help former prisoners return to their home worlds. Many of the liberated beings chose to stay and help others rather than leave immediately. Hana stood in the center of the sandy fighting ground where she had pretended to be dead just hours earlier. The Deathstalker was beside her along with dozens of other creatures who had chosen freedom over the safety of remaining captive. Representatives from multiple worlds were already making contact with her, asking questions about Earth and humanity. They wanted to know much more about a species that could inspire this kind of change with nothing but words and personal example. But Hana was not thinking about galactic politics or humanity's future among the stars. She was thinking about a simple truth that had made everything possible. Sometimes the most powerful thing anyone can do is refuse to stay down when someone expects them to fall. And sometimes when one person finds the courage to stand up, they discover that they were never truly alone in their fight. The arena was empty and quiet now, but its lesson would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. Humans had arrived among the stars, and they had brought something with them that no one had expected or prepared for. They had brought hope. And hope, as every tyrant and oppressor eventually learns, is the most dangerous and unstoppable weapon in the entire universe. The collision between Hana and the Deathstalker sent shockwaves through the entire arena. Dust and sand flew everywhere as the two figures disappeared in a thick cloud of debris. The crowd of thousands strained to see what had happened, expecting to find the human's broken body, crushed under the massive creature. Everyone was certain that this time the small woman from Earth had finally met her end, but when the dust cloud settled and the air became clear again, they saw something that went against everything they thought they knew about fighting and survival. Hana was still standing on her feet, and the Deathstalker was lying on its back, thrashing around wildly, trying to get up. She had somehow managed to grab onto the creature's throat during its charge and use its own speed and weight to flip it completely over. The most shocking part was not that she had survived the attack, or even that she had managed to knock down the arena's most deadly weapon. What made every alien in the arena freeze with terror was what happened next. Hana began to speak to the Deathstalker, in a calm, quiet voice, making soft sounds that seemed to have a strange effect on the enormous beast. "Easy now, easy," she whispered, keeping her hand on the creature's throat, but no longer squeezing hard enough to hurt it. "I know you are scared and angry. I know they took you from your home and made you into a weapon when all you really wanted was to be free." The Deathstalker's wild struggling began to slow down. Its glowing yellow eyes, which had been filled with rage and the desire to kill, began to show something completely different: confusion and surprise. And then something that seemed completely impossible happened. The creature stopped fighting altogether and just lay there looking up at Hana with those huge yellow eyes. In the special viewing area, where the most important alien sat, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms turned to the Vex leader. "What is she doing to your Deathstalker?" he asked in a worried voice. "How is she controlling the most dangerous creature in your arena?" The Vex leader had no answer to give. He had bred the Deathstalker himself, using the most advanced technology available. He had designed it to be the perfect killing machine that would know nothing except violence and the desire to destroy enemies. Yet here was this human female treating it like it was just a frightened animal instead of a monster. What none of the aliens watching could understand was that humans had spent thousands of years learning to live alongside other species on their home planet. They had learned to read the body language and emotions of creatures that were very different from themselves. They had taken wild wolves and turned them into friendly dogs. They had made wild horses into partners for work and travel. They had even learned to work with creatures that most other beings would consider too dangerous to go near. Hana could see that the Deathstalker was not naturally mean or violent. It had been hurt and trained to fight by creatures who did not care about its feelings, but underneath all that forced training was just an animal that wanted to survive. She recognized the look in its eyes because she had seen the same look in her own reflection during the long months she had been trapped in this place. "They hurt you too, did they not?" she said softly now, gently stroking the creature's neck with her hand. "They took you from somewhere peaceful and beautiful and made you into their entertainment just like they did to me." The Deathstalker made a sound that was almost like crying. The crowd was completely silent now, unable to understand what they were seeing. Some of the younger aliens had never seen their ultimate weapon show anything except anger and the desire to kill. Now it was acting like an ordinary animal that just wanted kindness. Hana slowly stood up and the Deathstalker rolled onto its belly, but stayed down, watching her with those yellow eyes that no longer looked angry or dangerous. She had done something that the Vex had thought was completely impossible. She had reached the mind of a creature they had assumed was nothing but instinct and violence. The Vex leader was more angry than he had ever been in his entire life. This human was making him look weak and foolish in front of representatives from dozens of the most powerful worlds in the galaxy. He activated his personal communication device and spoke rapidly in his own language, giving orders that made his assistants look worried. Within moments, armed guards began pouring into the arena from doors all around the fighting area. Not just a few guards this time, but dozens of them, all carrying the most deadly weapons the Vex possessed. "Kill them both," the leader commanded, and his voice echoed across the arena. "I want this human dead right now, and I want our Death Stalker destroyed for showing weakness." But as the guards charged across the sand toward Hana and her unlikely new friend, something happened that no one had expected. The Death Stalker stepped in front of Hana, using its massive body to shield her from the approaching enemies. For the first time in its entire life, it had chosen to protect someone instead of destroy them. Hana looked up at the enormous creature standing over her and felt something she had not experienced since the day she was captured. Hope. She was no longer alone in this fight against impossible odds. More importantly, she had just proven something that would change the balance of power throughout the entire galaxy. Humans did not fight only with strength or speed or advanced weapons. They fought with understanding and compassion. They could turn enemies into allies, monsters into friends, and hopeless situations into opportunities for something better. This was the real reason why people from Earth were dangerous to those who wanted to control and oppress others. The Death Stalker had spent years being forced to kill for the entertainment of others, but in just a few minutes of kindness from a human, it had remembered what it really wanted: freedom and friendship instead of violence and fear. As the armed guards got closer, Hana placed her hand on the Death Stalker's side and whispered, "Ready to show them what real freedom looks like." The creature roared, but this time it was not a sound of rage or hatred. It was a battle cry of liberation. And for the first time since the arena had been built many years ago, the crowd of watching aliens began to feel truly afraid of what was happening in the sand below them.